Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Malcolm and Marie. This is the new Netflix film written and directed by Sam Levinson. I don't know much about Sam Levinson at all. All I know is that he, worked on the HBO critically acclaimed series Euphoria, starring Zendaya, and when the production was shut down for that during the pandemic, he and Zendaya talked about collaborating for a feature-length film together. And this film was pitched as a quarantine project. It was entirely created following the quarantine guidelines. There are only 2 actors in the film. All of the production team quarantined together during the duration of the production. They had a limited amount of people that they could have on set at each given time. And yeah, this is just meant to be like an intimate drama of a relationship between a director and his muse of sorts, his inspiration for his latest film. And it is shot in a black and white but grainy sort of photography, 35 millimeter. It's going for that stylish kind of noir classic aesthetic, but yet the graininess of it gives it that grit and that rawness that you might have seen from a lot of American films, particularly, I should say, more artful American films from the 1960s and the early 70s. It certainly reminded me of Cassavetes a little bit in style, but certainly I think maybe most of all, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, one of the great American films of the 1960s, in my opinion. And yeah, this is just one of those portraits of one relationship over, a night's period, a big fight that they have. And during the fight, you're seeing a lot of aspects of society reflected, politics, how life imitates art, all the check boxes. And I don't want to misjudge this person just because, again, this is the first thing I have ever seen by him. But based on what I'm seeing here, this guy comes off as somebody who is just a little bit too concerned about how he wants to be perceived artistically. I think he really wants to be perceived as somebody who is intellectual and self-aware about his creative process so that no one questions him. So he uses that, it seems, like a safety net so he doesn't have to dig deeper. And therefore he never has to strip away any of the pseudo-intellectual ramblings that he has throughout the movie in order to truly examine real vulnerability, real rawness. And kind of like the way when you're having a conversation with somebody that you've just met and it rubs you the wrong way, I felt very similarly when I was watching this film, because it's hard to buy into something when it seems that the director is more interested in the reviews that he will receive for the project rather than discovering the actual meaning within the art. And this is very common in Hollywood movies, in all kinds of movies, but talking about Hollywood films in particular, a lot of them fall victim to this issue, so it's nothing new. But what makes this particular movie so cringy is because of how the whole thesis revolves around lecturing us about the authenticity of art, how important it can be, and yet this movie is using this so-called art that it's talking about more just as aesthetic manipulation, as a star vehicle, as smoke and mirrors. The message here is presented in a very smug sort of way, and like I said, very self-conscious sort of way. And, then your ignorance and your hypocrisy to your own failings creatively start to outweigh that message, that thesis. And it just feels like a boner killer. It feels like a needle popping a balloon. I felt like I was watching a movie made by a college student who thinks they know everything about life because they subscribe to the New York Times. John David Washington here plays Malcolm, and as an actor, I think he is somebody who is, he's very physical just in terms of his presence as an actor, and, his diction, the way he enunciates, it's not particularly subtle, but I think it works very well for this character because this character is a very physical being. Stereotypical director. And, I would say it's pretty accurate. Self-absorbed, obnoxious, and deeply insecure about his failings, or I should say his fear of failing, which is why he spends half the movie ranting and raving about the meaning of art and how his lack of success is due more to identity politics rather than on the basis of merit. And don't get me wrong, he talks about that in the first scene of the film. It's his first big monologue, I guess you could say. And, I think he's very right. I totally agree with everything he's saying. It's something that I feel very strongly about myself. This fear that, in this culture, especially in Hollywood, we're wrapping the entire country in this stronghold of identity politics, making everything so consciously about skin color and gender and class, political motive, so that the soul, the truth, the authenticity of things is completely lost. And I think he's correct and justified in that. And his criticism of film critics, he's totally on point about that. But that being said, even though the content of what he's saying I totally agree with, that does not make it a good scene. If I wanted to hear someone spill endless word vomit on identity politics, I could just go to a Twitter thread, or I could go to a YouTube comment section. Through the artistic lens, it doesn't work for me, because this whole, just the way that this monologue is written, it's just so ham-fisted and petty, and the bitterness of this director is coming through to such a degree that I can barely see Malcolm at all as a character. You know, to me, I see him more as a puppet for Levinson to, you know, use as his soapbox to lay out all of his bitterness about the industry. Rather than letting these characters breathe and letting them grow organically as real characters with real motivations and real flaws, light and shade, they'd rather turn this more into a political statement, which is precisely what Levinson is criticizing in the first place about art. And you could argue that, yes, these characters do grow, and we do start to see more of their motivations and the flaws within them as the movie progresses. We're kind of peeling away layers, I guess you could say. And yes, like on paper, he is doing that, but again, it's always in a way where he feels like he's checking to be sure that we notice. And the way that this movie is designed structurally, from a narrative standpoint, it is just so calculated, it's so repetitive, and it makes the climactic build of this entire fight feel so incredibly dull. And it wants to be edgy and raw, mixed with that, you know, classic black and white sophistication, so I guess it at least appears like it matters. And yet it's so unsurprising. Like, I was so bored. In that third act, it almost completely lost me. I had to like force myself to stay awake. Not a single frame in this movie isn't completely conscious of what it's trying to convey. Not one thing here feels genuine. And there isn't a moment where any of that elevates into breaking new ground. It's just a setup of an argument and then an exploration of that argument from one party in particular as they give a monologue, followed by each character separating and reflecting on their own, you know, during some bougie poetic smoke break with some cool jazz playing over the montages, because, you know, art. And they do this setup over and over and over again. So there's nothing unique or surprising about it. It is argument, followed by overwrought response to the argument, then smoke break. Argument, overwrought response, smoke break. Everything is so imitation and so staged. Every black and white image is very, you know, pristine and down to the blocking decisions. Every shot is composed in such a way that it's very deliberate. Washington is very physical in the movie, but, you know, his character is just so unlikable and he's so annoying. He loves to do a lot of dancing and like punching the air when he's frustrated about the fight, but it all feels so calculated, so choreographed, as though he was in a dance studio doing everything. And it's like they were like, this is the scene where nothing is happening, so you can kind of artfully go into some, you know, Fred Astaire sort of improv. And it's going to be a meditation on your character's frustrations and the rebellion against his critics. I certainly prefer the character of Marie, who is, of course, that dose of reality that this character needs, that balance that he needs. And she's played by Zendaya in her first major leading role in a film, I believe. And as a character, you know, she's more reserved and more contemplative than he is. But of course, she's also somebody who is very damaged, and she's rightfully mad at him for not giving her the credit that she deserves. But of course, her issues in the end don't really amount to anything other than what is just really formulaic, a catalyst to pick apart more self-conscious issues. The more it boils down to these characters' true motivations for the fight that they have from the beginning is ultimately empty, and it says nothing interesting at all. It's just two beautiful people positioned in such a way that they, you know, echo a lot of the classic films of the past that Levinson clearly has a great appreciation for, without understanding what it was about those movies that made them great. There is a danger to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and everything feels like this, like it's teetering between this very cartoonish humor and devastation and complete manic chaos. And it's riveting in every single moment. And I might not be so tough on this movie if it wasn't so incredibly hypocritical. The fog of hypocrisy here is so thick that I can barely make the actors out on the screen. And look, Levinson, I don't think he's untalented. I think he does have a point of view that could be interesting if he ever was interested in really delving into things he's afraid of, uncharted territory. Certainly he has a great sense of aesthetic. You know, all of that I think is very true. But again, this movie feels more like it's written by somebody who is more interested in arguing with themselves in the mirror. And these two characters are kind of just representing that archetypally. And it's boring because those, you know, pseudo-musings don't involve any risk. And I think it would do him a lot of good to walk away from the mirror, have some experiences, and living in that moment, that's when you start to draw something beautiful out, something genuine in a way that truly matters. But I just don't think psychologically he seems to be ready for it at this point. And again, not untalented, just misguided. But yeah, in the words of Habib Nurmagomedov, I don't like this. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. All of my Patreon supporters are here. Thank you guys again. If you like supporting artists and you're interested in art, I am an artist and I sell prints of my work as well as commissioned portraits, and you can see all of that at deepfocuslens.com. I have a link for it below. If you are interested in a commission or a print, you can just email me. My email is below as well, and we can chat a little bit. But other than that, all of my social media information is below. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.